the great thing about the market is that it helps. Well, it takes advantage of people's self-interest. I mean, there's a famous quote of Adam Smith about how we rely on the baker for our meals, and on the candlestick maker for the candles, not out of any social concern they have, but out of their concern for their self-interest. I think I butchered that quote, but that's the basic idea. So is that the idea? So it's taking advantage of that and getting the incentives right. And if you're in say what you had in the Soviet Union, then all those incentives are the wrong way. You're trying to get, well, you're not necessarily, to get something for yourself, you don't necessarily have to create value for another person. And that's the great thing about the market. It's that mutual exchange, that you're creating value for the other person for them to pay you. That's roughly on the right track, is it?
Well, I think those things are all very consistent with the assumption, but one of the things that I'm doing from the worldview I'm speaking, which is different than the way Ayn Rand as an objectivist would approach it, and in fact, many secular economists would describe it descriptively, that descriptively, one can do better for themselves by serving their customer better. And Adam Smith's reference to that self-interest is what they're referencing. And it's almost indisputable. It's the way the world works. But what I'm adding is the prescriptive, not merely the descriptive, not just that you will do better by serving your neighbor better, but that you ought to serve your neighbor better. And that in so doing, we cultivate more trust in society, and commercial transactions are entirely dependent on trust. And so they're not merely in microtransactions like the brewer or baker or candlestick maker with a customer, but on a macro level, the greater sense of moral sentiment in the society, which of course was Adam Smith's other book. We couple these two coexisting realities of human nature together, which is mankind rationally working in their own self-interest, providing for their family, and at the same time, their need to and requirement to have that sort of moral capacity of service. And so I think that Burke referred to this as enlightened self-interest. And I believe it is the ideal for what I'm after in a framework of economics. There's no question that whether one accepts my religious assumptions or not, that the free market properly aligns incentives better than the Marxist or central planning, collectivist vision for society that strips away incentives and does not provide the framework for best serving a customer by meeting human needs, providing goods or services that we believe people care about. But I do believe one can make an argument, and I think that this is the straw man that a lot of socialists today are arguing against, that, well, if you don't care about the moral well-being of society in your economic worldview, and that all you're saying is that pragmatically your well-being will be best served the more you serve your neighbor, all we have to do is find a case where that isn't true, and it would be okay. And most certainly it sometimes isn't true, because as long as you can get away with it, cooking the books can help you and hurt your neighbor. And again, you have to be able to get away with it, but a lot of people can get away with fraud. A lot of people can get away with theft. So this Darwinian view that is more driven by the best outcome for oneself and only relies on serving others as a mere pragmatic supplemental convenience to the process, I think it falls apart in reality, because apart from that framework that still honors service to oneself to others, then one loses the kind of holistic nature that has been the traditional case for free markets. And I would argue more or less the outcome, that when we look at the great fruits of poverty alleviation and human flourishing, that's come out of free markets, we have never been in need of divorcing that from a moral framework. In fact, it requires a moral and a legal framework, rule of law, the enforcement of private property. But these are all concepts that have roots in the very 10 Commandments of themselves. So coveting what someone else has is sort of the heart of Marxism, and believing in protection of private property is the heart of what we call capitalism. And yet those are moral commandments. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet. So I think that synthesis between the moral nature of markets and the kind of aspirational vision of society and the self-interest that Adam Smith talks about are entirely consistent. And in fact, not only consistent, but they're optimized. They work best in conjunction with one another. They each work with sort of one hand tied behind their back apart from the other.